Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shop Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, live today on April 24th, a day before the NFL draft starts. I have a lot of draft content to cover on today's episode, but before I do that, on the first segment, I want to talk about Jerry Jones and his most recent comments on the contracts around Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons, and why that is all being held up at the moment. Later on, we're going to talk about the Steelers and their pre-draft press conference that was held on Monday. Then we can get into all the Eagles talk around the draft, trying to trade up, as well as where Bo Nix and Michael Penix sit right now in terms of where they're looking to get drafted. All of that is coming on today's episode, so make sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the show. And before I start on the first segment, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments, to please use the tip and donations link you see on your screen, GSMCPodcast.net. Using that link makes it easier for me to see your questions pop up in my chat box. I could read it on air, and that way carry on the conversation. Just get your guys' perspective on anything. It's a big help for this show, as well as all the other shows across the network, and we always appreciate it a lot whenever you guys are able to use that link, which is, once again, GSMCPodcast.net. In saying that, before actually I jump into this first segment on Jerry Jones, I just want to say quickly beforehand, on my way here, some breaking news that dropped before. If you didn't see Adam Schefter or other reporters, insiders talk on it, just briefly here, Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals and T. Higgins, again, technically, requested a trade away from the Cincinnati Bengals, starting with Trey Hendrickson, one part of their star duo tandem that they have there with Hubbard. He requested a trade, mostly just for financial reasons, as Adam Schefter reported. He is due to make $15 million, and he values himself more than that. And really, there hasn't been any negotiations on that part, so he's requested a trade. And T. Higgins has requested a trade again. He did so before, but he did it again now, recently, because ever since just about a year ago, there haven't been any negotiations on his contract, so he's asked once again to be traded. And I just wanted to get that out there. I won't make it a whole segment, but it is pretty significant for the Bengals that we're gearing up to have a big year. But with sudden moves like this, it could all just really affect everything. I don't expect the Bengals to trade both of them, but it is out there. They have requested trades, so it is something to monitor as the offseason goes on, and maybe how it affects the draft here coming up tomorrow. But in saying that, we can get into Jerry Jones and what they said recently. Talking with ESPN and The Athletic yesterday, they were asked about the contract negotiations and really what's holding it up, why it's going so slow, and where do they stand with Dak and CeeDee mostly, because those are the ones that are really coming down to the wire now this year or next year. The Cowboys have to make a decision. And oddly enough, when they asked Jerry Jones about it, the biggest issue just really has been the lack of movement and not really seeing anything happen up to this point. You've heard Dak say nothing's happened, and Jerry Jones really doesn't seem too concrete on it. So they asked him about it, and Jerry Jones said, if you've got trouble with when the timing is around here, it's because I'm not ready to go. He said that to ESPN, and that, first off, was pretty alarming to me, I guess, just because I wouldn't expect Jerry Jones to say that. Everybody thinks there's all these external factors with Dak and the contracts, and I'm sure a lot of people would point to any other reasons why this contract wouldn't be moving as it should. But Jerry Jones said it comes down to him not really being ready to come to a concrete decision as of now. I'm sure it'll speed up more after the draft, but for right now, he's saying basically that he's not ready to commit to anything right now, and really just in no rush, it seems, the way he answered that question. And going on with the rest of the interview and more on what Jerry Jones said, to expand on this first initial quote, he went on to say, "You may be working on contracts, not moving anything but your eyebrows. Who in the world would think that we're not working on it? I work on it. it pops up at 2 in the morning sometimes where you're actually questioning is why don't you have something done and negotiated and put in the drawer? Well, we'd like to see some more leaves fall. We'd like to see some more action. And that one, saying that, coming from Jerry Jones, pretty honest response in the first statement and this one where he continued on. It makes sense, with contracts, just in layman's terms, there is a lot of reading and going over things and making sure everything's all right, and you're not actually physically moving or doing anything, but you are still progressing and understanding everything more and more, and it takes a long time, as business does, as these contract situations do with players. But the most interesting part about this whole thing for me was that he said he'd want to see more action, more things happen before he could really move on with this. And it just makes you think in CD's terms. It makes you think of all the other receivers. Just today, you saw Amon-Ra St. Brown get a contract extension. Now he's the highest paid receiver in the NFL. That's some movement. That's something that will affect CD's contract. I'm sure he's going to monitor how Jamar Chase, who the Bengals just picked up his fifth-year option, so that benefits the Cowboys in a way. They don't feel rushed. Say the Bengals gave Jamar Chase a massive contract today as well. Very early, but it could have happened. If they did do that, it would be more pressure on the Cowboys. And I'm sure they're going to still wait to see what Justin Jefferson does with his contract and how the Vikings handle that. With Justin Jefferson, I'm sure trying to be the highest paid wide receiver now, not only does he have to eclipse Tyreek Hill, he now has to try and eclipse Amon-Ra St. Brown, who just took over that spot from Tyreek Hill. So the longer you wait, the more expensive it could become. And that's what's just so confusing to me. Waiting longer doesn't seem to pan out for the Cowboys in any way. Just if CD, it just feels like CD's going to drive the price up more if the roof, the ceiling of it just keeps climbing higher and higher. I expect it to with Jefferson, so that's where I stand on that, on what Jerry Jones said and just how he feels about it. And even more so on that part, on seeing more reactions and seeing more action coming from these contracts. Stephen Jones also talked about it on Tuesday in a media availability session, and he touched on CD and Jamar Chase as well by saying, "You don't think the representatives of Jefferson and CD and Jamar Chase aren't talking? You don't think they got their eyes on something really big? Please, they're not ready to come in here." Same thing with Micah, same thing with Dak. It's a little cat and mouse, and total respect for them. Just adding on to the point, really with what Jerry Jones has alluded to and has talked about with CD, Jamar. I'm sure their representatives talk to each other, trying to see how they can get these teams to try and give their representatives, their clients, I should say, the best offer with the most guarantees and really just what benefits them. Not like they haven't earned it, like they're trying to pull a fast one on these teams, but they're all just trying to see what could work out best for all of them, because I'm sure most people would classify Jefferson, CD, and Jamar in that same tier of number one stud wide receivers. You can't name many more other than Tyreek Hill maybe and Devontae Adams that would go above these three, CD, Jamar, and Jefferson. Amon-Ra St. Brown just got his contract, and that's great. He deserved it. In all honesty, I didn't think he would get that much money, but the Lions value him. You saw how important he was to his team. Now he got maybe even more than he would have expected, but that's sort of what happens when you wait this long to try and figure something out. And I can almost guarantee Justin Jefferson is going to want the exact amount as Amon-Ra St. Brown, or definitely more. You have some time there with Chase, but CeeDee Lamb, I can't imagine him asking for much less than 28, probably the lowest, or $29 million per year. And that's something they have to work out, and it's something that leads you into this next topic that Jerry Jones talked about and sort of acknowledged and submitted to, in a way of admitting with the contracts of Dak, with the contracts of CeeDee Lamb, it might be great for them if they're able to get all this money, but you have to pull it from somewhere else, and that's where the biggest problem lies. If you pay 3 players the maximum amount of money that they want, they've earned, great, they get their money, you keep them, they're great players, but you have to start taking bits and pieces from your defense, your offensive line, just a bunch of pieces on the defensive side of the ball, your edge rushers, your linebackers, anything that goes along with that. If you have good players there, you're going to have to take away from their money, essentially, to pay some of these guys, and that's where the decision-making comes in. That's where everything gets a bit tricky, and you have to make some of these tough decisions, which they have made, getting rid of a lot of pieces on their offensive line. And just really everywhere else on the team. Running back is an issue. Wide receiver, other than CD, who else do you really have? Jerry Jones acknowledged that, and, it is something that he has to consider. He talked about it. He said, Dak has enjoyed in his career that we're so proud of, some of the best supporting cast that you could put around him. To move forward, we will have to diminish that. That's a fact. That's the rules. That's our challenge. And to make it work out, Dak as a quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, I don't think even I have to think twice about that. Supporting Dak Prescott in one hand, but also acknowledging that it does come with a bit of a sacrifice, really, with the Cowboys if they want to go all in on Dak and get him this money that they surely support. He said in his statement that he's so proud of Dak. He wants to keep Dak. Later in that interview is what he said. So if you really think he's the guy, yes, give him his money, but it will come at a cost. And that's where I think a lot of people start to diverge on where they fall in trying to pay Dak, not trying to pay Dak. Who do you sacrifice, CD, Micah, or Dak? It's an extremely tough position for the Cowboys, and you do want to wait, you do want to think about it and really consider all your options, but you don't really have time on your side, which is the biggest point I'm trying to make, with everybody else sort of jumping the gun, jumping in front of you in negotiations and getting all of their dirty work done before, training camp OTA starts to, wipe it away and stop thinking about it. With the Cowboys, because they have so many tough decisions to make now, how to still improve and compete in the NFC that's just getting better, it's a weird spot where they find themselves. Not a lot of positives that they can pull out of this. The draft is certainly going to help to try and replenish this with younger, cheaper, most of all, deals that they can work in. But I don't expect them drafting a quarterback like some people have mentioned. They're not going to draft a wide receiver in case CD leaves. Micah's not walking out the door. It's hard when you have this level of talent and still trying to be competitive. That's why it's such an impressive merit when the Chiefs stay so good for a while, or with the Patriots, or even with the 49ers trying to keep all their players together. That's why it's so impressive. And the Cowboys are trying to do that, but I just think along the way they've taken some missteps that have cost them now more than ever, with that deal to Dak, not extending him when they should have a year before, waiting this long with CeeDee Lamb when he became extension eligible last year, if not the year before. Waiting this long does come with its downfalls, and now the Cowboys have to try and maneuver around it. We'll see where they go from here. I don't think they can wait much longer, but again, they like to do things their way, so we'll see how they end up more so after the draft, when all this attention on the draft has gone by. But we'll leave it at that. In the meantime, we'll continue on with the show. We're going to go to a quick break right now, and on the other side, we're going to talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and some of the takeaways I got from their pre-draft press conference on Monday, talking about quarterbacks, wide receivers, and what the draft is looking like, with some rumors floating around out there. So stick around, more to come on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.